Colorado epitomizes American bounty. It's a state blessed with magnificent beauty, rich natural resources, and enterprising people. And few places straddle the great divide over environment protection the way Colorado does. Like America as a whole, folks here don't always agree on how to balance our duty on the one hand to be good stewards of the earth, and on the other to ensure this generation can enjoy all the benefits progress can offer. Fox News has been crisscrossing the country to bring you a better understanding of what's really driving the green debate. First up, Greg Jarrett investigates the rise and fall of a high-ranking Obama appointee in the Environmental Protection Agency and whether his radical views are all too common at that increasingly powerful agency.
It's kind of like how the Romans used to, conquer little villages in the Mediterranean.
Al Armendariz was one of the Environmental Protection Agency's top officials until this tape went viral in April of 2012.
They'd go to a little Turkish town somewhere, they'd find the first 5 guys they saw, and they'd crucify them. And then, that town was really easy to manage for the next few years.
Crucify them. Armendariz was talking about how he deals with the oil and gas producers he regulated in Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas, which comprise the EPA's Region 6. The video sparked a political firestorm.
His comments were wrong. Frankly, they were inflammatory.
Armendariz's boss, EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, accepted his resignation, saying his views were not shared by the president who had appointed him.
They don't comport with this administration's policy on energy.
But Fox News has learned it was not the only time Armendariz openly threatened companies he regulated.
He appeared before the Oklahoma Independent Petroleum Association. What happened?
He told the group straight on that we're going to use everything in the book to come after you.
Harold Hamm is the CEO of Continental Resources, an oil and gas exploration company. He was recently appointed chairman of the Romney campaign's Energy Policy Advisory Group.
We got the drift right quick that basically is out to shut us down.
Armendariz made it clear that oil and gas industry was the enemy.
Well, we certainly took that away.
And there's more. Before joining the Obama administration, Armendariz taught engineering at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. He also advised environmental groups in their battle against something called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. The technique injects water and chemicals far below ground to extract otherwise unrecoverable oil and gas. It's created a bonanza. But many environmentalists say fracking pollutes air, land, and water, a claim most famously advanced in the Oscar-nominated documentary Gasland. The film made its point by igniting methane gas seeping out of a kitchen sink in Colorado.
Whoa.
The film included an appearance by then-Professor Armendariz, a cameo that would later spark a different kind of expose altogether. That story begins in 2010, when a Texan named Stephen Lipsky attended a screening of Gasland near Fort Worth, Texas. After Lipsky said he suspected that his well had been fouled by fracking, he was put in contact with a local anti-fracking activist named Melissa Rich. Rich went to Lipsky's home with a camera, connected a garden hose to a spigot, and put a match to the end. Like Gasland's signature scene, it ignited.
Holy cow.
Rich then emailed a copy to Armendariz, now at the EPA, as proof that fracking by a company named Range Resources had fouled Mr. Lipsky's well. According to EPA records, agency scientists had serious misgivings about the video and other evidence that had been gathered. But Armendariz brushed them aside and pushed through an emergency order against Range Resources. He then went on local TV.
Not only is there natural gas in the water well, but that this is natural gas that is coming from the production activities of Range.
Mike Williams, then the top oil and gas regulator for the state of Texas, decided to review the matter himself.
There was no way in the world that Range's production activities had anything to do with the natural gas that might have been in Mr. Lipsky's water.
Indeed, when Lipsky took his claim to state court, the judge found that Rich didn't screw that garden hose onto a water spigot, but instead intentionally attached it to a methane gas vent, a common feature on many private water wells because methane gas is often found there. Then they hit the record button and lit the escaping gas.
Oh my God, look at that.
Texas District Court judge found that Alyssa Rich produced, quote, a deceptive video calculated to alarm the public into believing that the fracking operations of a company called Range Resources were endangering human life.
Not only did she do that, she then passed that information on to Region 6 EPA, and then they took it and ran with it as well.
So Range Resources falsely accused.
They were falsely accused, yes. This was an outlandish lie. And it is unfortunate that a federal official who's been given the public trust would falsify activity and go after a Texas business.
Is it possible Armendariz didn't actually know that the tests had been deceptive or falsified?
Mr. Armendariz was a willing participant in the collusion. It wasn't as somebody pulled the wool over his eyes. Al had his own agenda that was adverse to the natural gas industry in Texas.
Last spring, the EPA quietly rescinded the endangerment order against Range Resources issued by Armendariz. But Senator John Barrasso, a Wyoming Republican, insists this goes beyond one regulator's agenda.
That's the way the EPA has been actually behaving over the last 2 years, and it's why they've gained this reputation for being abusive.
He says in his state, another EPA administrator has twice tried to unfairly shut down a natural gas fracking operation.
Their science has been called out as being faulty. I view it as a vendetta against red, white, and blue American energy.
At the heart of the debate over environmental policy is the Environmental Protection Agency. America is a lot cleaner than it used to be, and many give the EPA the credit. But that isn't all the agency is doing, or hopes to do in the future. So should Americans worry about EPA mission creep? Want to talk about environmental problems in America? Look back a few decades. LA smog was so bad in the 1940s, one day panicked Californians thought the Japanese had launched a chemical weapons attack. In the 1950s, you could barely see across Pittsburgh many days. In 1965, Time magazine pronounced Lake Erie a dead sea, killed by industrial pollution. And President Johnson declared the raw sewage flowing down the Potomac a national disgrace. For the first time, polls showed the environment was one of America's greatest worries. That presented an opportunity for LBJ's successor.
President Nixon in 1968, he was moved by that to say to his people, get out front on the environment.
Just days after Nixon took office, a huge oil spill hit Santa Barbara, California. Then, Ohio's Cuyahoga River caught fire. William Riley was one of Richard Nixon's senior environmental advisors.
If you got rivers catching fire, you better be aggressive.
Weeks after the first Earth Day in 1970, Nixon established, by executive order, the brand new Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, it's fair to say the government did a pretty good job of cleaning things up.
Absolutely.
As director of the Copenhagen Consensus Center, Bjorn Lomborg writes extensively on green regulators.
Rivers are not catching fire anymore, and that's a great thing.
We dug through some public opinion in those years, and even as the nation's air and water were getting cleaner and the toxic waste dumps were getting cleaned up, the American people were still getting increasingly worried about the environment. Why is that, do you think?
We went from not worrying at all in the 40s and 50s to possibly worrying too much, or at least worrying about the wrong things.
Blame that, Lomborg says, on a new genre of environmental doomsday books, beginning with Silent Spring by marine biologist Rachel Carson. A runaway bestseller in 1962, it envisioned humans gradually destroying the world by, among other things, the indiscriminate use of chemicals like DDT.
Spraying of pesticides should be brought under strict control.
Lomborg credits Silent Spring with launching the modern environmental movement. That movement showed its strength by getting William Ruckelshaus, the first EPA chief, to ban the insecticide DDT in 1972. The EPA's lead was followed by increasing restrictions worldwide of the pesticide over the next 30 years.
And that, unfortunately, was incredibly wrong-headed.
Wrong-headed, Lomborg says, because the DDT restrictions likely contributed to several million unnecessary deaths from mosquito-borne malaria worldwide. Silent Spring was followed by a string of bestsellers that predicted mass starvation, economic implosion, even the collapse of civilization itself, all within decades.
Did people believe this stuff?
Very clearly, most people believed it back in the 70s. The age was scared witless.
The environmental movement began to morph into something new.
And so did the EPA, says anthropologist Peter Wood, who has written extensively on the movement.
EPA engaged in mission creep. It began to look at more elusive threats, chemicals that might or might not be carcinogenic.
Americans do want protection from threats of all sorts, risks that we didn't even know about.
By the late 1970s, increasingly intrusive EPA regulations led to a backlash.
We will not permit the safety of our people or our environmental heritage to be jeopardized, but we are going to reaffirm that the economic prosperity of our people is a fundamental part of our environment.
But even under President Reagan's watch, the EPA managed to turn a community into a ghost town. Times Beach, Missouri. Scientists found tiny traces of dioxin, at the time thought to be the most toxic chemical synthesized by man. The government permanently evacuated Times Beach, uprooting thousands. Today, that toxic town is a popular state park. That's right. The federal health official who ordered the evacuation later admitted he'd overreacted. Riley would become EPA's administrator 2 years later. He pushed to expand his agency's regulatory reach.
What was your crowning achievement at EPA?
Well, our crowning achievement was the use of market incentives for the first time in a major statute.
He's talking about what's now known as cap and trade, a system that makes companies pay if they pollute. It was used to combat acid rain, sulfur dioxide from Midwest smokestacks said to be killing trees in the Northeast.
A hugely effective, largely now accepted and supported approach to pollution control.
The EPA got vast additional authority in 2007 when the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the Clean Air Act authorized the agency to regulate greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide is what we exhale. Carbon dioxide is necessary for plants.
Long before he was a radio talk show host, Mark Levin started the Landmark Legal Foundation. In that capacity, he's regularly tangled with the EPA in court.
We have an unelected branch of government giving another unelected branch of government enormous powers.
What do you say to the people out there who say, Mark, calm down, it's not that bad?
I don't mean to sound alarmist, but the Environmental Protection Agency has many of the attributes of the old Soviet system. Faceless bureaucrats, setting industrial policy. This is something we should be very, very concerned about as a people.
The Obama administration has suggested the EPA will use its new power to impose in a command and control way a cap and trade system for carbon if Congress doesn't act. It's a massive tax that could cost the American economy more than $500 billion a year. Trillion with a T, according to the National Association of Manufacturers. Riley, the former Republican EPA chief, says something like that needs to be done.
I think that EPA has been led to a position where it's got to act.
Many disagree. Among other things, the EPA cleanup operations of 40 years ago cost relatively little, and most everyone benefited. In contrast, an all-out effort to lower the temperature of the planet, assuming global warming is a real problem that humans can reverse, would surely be the most complicated and expensive undertaking in human history.
The kinds of pollution in Pittsburgh when I was growing up just gone. And I'm very grateful to that generation at the EPA who helped to make it happen.
For Peter Wood, the EPA's latest mission reveals not a concern for the environment, but a radical agenda that's less about the environment than most Americans might imagine. As you'll see later, he discovered that in a college freshman dorm, far from the corridors of power. Citizens elect representatives to set national policy by passing laws. That's how democracy is supposed to work. But now, questions about whether the EPA, with the help of courts and environmental groups, has seized power that voters can no longer control. 2010, the Northwest Environmental Defense Center convinces a court that muddy water running off logging roads is industrial pollution, requiring an EPA clean water permit. The timber industry says that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars, kill thousands of jobs, and invite protracted litigation without any environmental benefit. 2009, another environmental group, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, sues to force the EPA to crack down on water runoff from farms along the bay. The EPA settled and imposed strict new rules that the American Farm Bureau says will cost billions of dollars. 2011, the EPA imposes stricter limits on pesticide use than Congress required after a consortium of environmental groups sued, saying that lawmakers were being too lenient. Just a few of a series of cases that show how environmental groups exert extraordinary influence over the EPA.
They use a lot of litigation to get federal judges to order the EPA to do what they want them to do.
Stephen Hayward is a professor of public policy at Pepperdine University.
This is a long and complicated story, and it's very poorly understood by the public and even by members of Congress.
My understanding is that there are situations where groups file suit against your agency, and literally on the same day, there are settlements entered into by your agency with those groups.
I'm not aware of any settling the same day.
There's a long history under all administrations of EPA kind of working with advocacy groups in what I would call a sweetheart deal.
Jeff Homestead is a former assistant EPA administrator.
If someone brings one of these cases, they get to recover any fees, and you have to pay for their costs of bringing the suit. So it's a pretty good moneymaker.
And it gets even worse, says Homestead.
Many of those same groups also get grants from EPA.
It seems like a screwy system.
I've said for years I think it's a screwy system. But that's the system that we have.
Wow.
We are subsidizing these groups to bring lawsuits to attack private property rights, to attack the capitalist system, to attack various industries.
Mark Levin says in many cases the law gives environmental groups special standing to sue.
It is a horrendous circle.
Environmental groups claim that by bringing these citizen suits, they're simply representing the average American's interest in protecting the environment. But Louisiana Senator David Vitter, a Republican member of the Committee on Environment and Public Works, says environmental groups don't even have to sue to stop, delay, or threaten some projects. Case in point, Alaska, 2010. The Pebble Partnership proposes a new mineral mining operation that could generate billions of dollars of economic activity and thousands of jobs around the Bristol Bay region. Enter a local environmental group, which complained to the EPA. Despite the fact that no plan or permit had been submitted for review, the EPA announced its opposition to the project, concluding that it might interfere with a sockeye salmon habitat. Whether or not the project ultimately happens, Vitter says the EPA abused its power.
They are jumping the gun and looking to preempt the whole decision.
Even worse, Vitter says, some groups are now using the system to advance agendas that have nothing to do with the environment. In 2010, a collection of environmental groups petitioned the EPA to regulate the lead in bullets as a toxic substance, claiming they contaminate groundwater and poison wildlife. The EPA actually began the public comment process, but shut it down when a political firefight broke out.
The NRA accused the EPA of backdoor attempt to limit hunting and impose gun control.
Yeah,
You buy that?
I think it was clearly a clever, leftist approach to trying to cut down on gun rights and make life tougher for folks who own guns.
And Hayward thinks we haven't seen the last of it.
Environmental groups think of the EPA as their agency. They're just making a mess of things, and it's just going to get worse.
Since before he took office, President Obama has promised to boost the economy by creating millions of green jobs. Taxpayers have spent billions, but the green economy has yet to roar. So what about the real existing economy? The one that overwhelmingly still depends on fossil fuels. One decision captures for Obama's critics the radical nature of his green agenda. It's his refusal to go full bore on the Keystone XL pipeline.
Our experts said that we needed a certain amount of time to review the project.
The $7 billion project would transport oil from the petroleum-rich oil sands of Western Canada to refineries in Texas.
The environmentalists were saying we've got to stop it, and using every excuse they could.
Senator James Inhofe is a Republican from Oklahoma. He says building the pipeline is a no-brainer for many reasons, starting with the thousands of private sector jobs economists predict it would create.
We have all this capability, not just in producing and exploring, but also the pipelines going through. We have to keep the production in America.
The Obama administration, however, says it's concerned the pipeline would pollute aquifers it would cross over. And of course, getting more Canadian tar sand oil to market could only, in the administration's view, accelerate global warming. But what really gets Inhofe is another argument advanced by EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson: environmental justice.
It's what we see in inner cities, where air pollution makes kids miss school and workers stay home. It's what we see on tribal lands, where open landfills are rampant and drinking water is polluted.
The environmental justice argument goes something like the Keystone Pipeline will end up in Port Arthur, Texas. The refinery is in a neighborhood largely populated by minorities. The refining process will therefore pollute.
I would say that's one more fabrication used to retard our production in this country. Those people need jobs.
I've been working with people in Port Arthur, and their biggest cry, their biggest request is to have more high-paying oil jobs. And this is what this Keystone Pipeline would bring.
Harry Alford, president of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, doubts concerns about environmental justice are sincere.
I don't think that our EPA Administrator Jackson is just turning over at night thinking about the poor blacks in Port Arthur, Texas.
Senator David Vitter thinks the Obama administration employs many bogus arguments against fossil fuels.
Several years ago, Shell invested billions of dollars to get lease rights offshore Alaska. And the Obama EPA held that up for various imaginative reasons for a total of about 3 years.
The most imaginative delay tactic, he says, asserting that emissions from Shell's ice-breaking vessels would only approach impermissible air pollution levels.
And finally took action by the Congress and just took the entire jurisdiction of that particular matter out of the EPA's hands so this vital project could move on.
The EPA wouldn't talk to us. They only sent a statement which asserted its good faith efforts on the environment and that, quote, for over 40 years, the EPA has taken sensible steps that protect the air we breathe and the water we drink. And then there's the moratorium on gas and oil exploration in the Gulf of Mexico after the BP oil spill. President Obama's then energy and climate czar, Carol Browner, imposed it over objections that it would kill even more jobs in the region already devastated by the spill. But Browner cited a panel of experts that she said recommended stopping all exploration and drilling in the Gulf. But that wasn't true. An Interior Department Inspector General probe concluded that Browner had implied that the experts had supported the moratorium, when in fact they had neither reviewed nor supported such a policy decision.
And that investigation confirmed that Carol Browner and the White House doctored that report to lead to the moratorium.
Browner wouldn't talk to us. But Senator Vitter thinks it was a case of never letting a crisis go to waste.
When this opportunity came up, they immediately went to the most extreme action, completely shutting down the Gulf.
What kind of economic impact did that have on your region?
Huge impact, tens of thousands of jobs. That moratorium was far bigger than the hit from the spill itself, and it was the biggest negative thing we've dealt with in 5+ years.
This is Sustainability Park in downtown Denver. It celebrates the idea of sustainable development. You hear that term a lot these days, but do you really know what it means? What Greg Jarrett discovered might trouble you.
Sustainable planet.
Sustainable development. Sustainable campuses.
Clean, sustainable energy.
If you're like Peter Wood, former Boston University anthropology professor, former King's College provost, current president of the National Association of Scholars, you may have assumed that all this sustainability talk was just a fancy way of speaking green.
A sustainable future.
I thought it was just the up-to-date word for environmentalism.
Then Wood, whose organization was founded to confront the rise of campus political correctness, discovered a sustainability initiative at the University of Delaware. It seemed to have precious little to do with clean air or clean water.
The 7,000 dormitory students were expected to participate.
In this video, produced by another college watchdog group,
You guys are so racist. Don't be racist. Don't be racist.
students ripped the program.
You're important because you're from this race or you identify with this sexual orientation.
I support gay marriage, but that doesn't mean everyone in the school should have to.
The white students were told that they had to confess that they were racist. Students were told that if they didn't support gay marriage, they had to go stand in the corner.
It sounds like what you're describing is students being brainwashed.
It was an attempt to get inside students' heads, alienate them from American culture, make them feel guilty about the social attitudes they brought from their homes, and replace them with a basically quasi-Marxist view of the world.
I don't think anybody ever got indoctrinated. That's not really what was going on.
John Byrne is the director of the University Center for Energy and Environmental Policy, its top sustainability guru. While he says he had nothing to do with the program, he confirmed it was part of the university's sustainability push.
The aim at that point was a proposal that students would engage these somewhat controversial arguments, and some students felt that that was inappropriate.
So the school canceled the program. But Wood wanted to know what it had to do with sustainability in the first place. He got his answer in a University of Delaware computer presentation he found during his investigation. It illustrated the concept of sustainability with 3 overlapping circles: healthy environments plus strong economies and social justice. Where they overlap, that's the sustainable sweet spot. In other words, sustainability is about a lot more than the environment. Wood discovered that notions like anti-colonialism, ecofeminism, and eco-socialism, they can be part of sustainability too.
It's also about escaping from free enterprise, getting us set with this social justice agenda.
The term sustainability was coined in a 1987 United Nations report, says Byrne. Who should know? He was a member of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which shared the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore.
The argument was made that we need to figure out, on the one hand, how to make a world that would be economically improved, and on the other hand, make sure that we bequeath a functioning environment for future generations.
Green is just part of the equation.
Right, it's just part of the equation. That's right.
Much of the credit for turning the UN's idea of sustainable development into a true movement here in the U.S. goes to Anthony Cortese. He got a big assist from one of America's top Democratic power couples.
The Rio Summit in '92, John Kerry and Teresa Heinz got together. They emerged from that with the idea of sustainability.
Right.
They contacted you.
Yes. John Kerry called me up and said, you know, I think we really need to promote sustainable development.
They created a nonprofit called Second Nature. Cortese believed the best place to start changing the way Americans think and live was on college campuses. So he pushed the university presidents nationwide to make advancing the sustainability agenda their school's #1 priority.
How successful were you in getting their support?
We started in early 2007 with 12 colleges and universities that stepped up and made this commitment. So now we have 677 in all 50 states.
The sustainability movement is the biggest thing on the American college campus.
And Wood says it shouldn't surprise anyone that it's led to outrage over things like that sustainability program at the University of Delaware.
The sustainatopian view is that our civilization is founded on a rotten basis.
This is not what we're intending to do. There's no liberal, there's no conservative, there's no ideology here.
You're not driven by a liberal political agenda?
No.
But Second Nature's publications suggests otherwise.
Sustainable development and environmental justice redresses past, present, and future maldistribution of resources, privileges, and rights of endangered communities, of poor people, and of communities of color. And it really does sound like liberal social theory. Is that what you want all college students to adhere to?
No, it's what we want them to do is to understand what happened in the past and what the consequences were.
That's not what it says. What it says is we're going to redress and repay the inequalities of the past. I mean, that's what it says.
No. Can I see what it says?
Sure. It's circled.
Well,
it was your report.
Yes, it was our report.
We've got to make up for past inequality.
It's not the way I interpret it.
The question is how the Obama administration interprets the word sustainability. The evidence suggests a lot like Cortese.
Clean, sustainable economy.
That's EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson.
We must build and rebuild a country and an economy where everyone gets a fair shot.
Is the key to President Obama's green agenda in this report. It was commissioned after the president signed an executive order calling for an integrated strategy towards sustainability in the federal government. The report recommends the agency incorporate into its daily affairs the 3 sustainable development pillars: social, environmental, and economic.
Sounds like the EPA is on board with your sustainability.
Yes, sounds like it.
While the EPA tells Fox it has not yet made any decisions on implementation of the report, other administration sustainability initiatives have moved forward.
President Obama, is he on board with sustainability?
For me, that's an open question, although I see disturbing signs of the sustainability movement being translated into public policy.
Desert in eastern California, a massive solar energy installation designed to help that state meet a mandate to generate 1/3 of its electricity from green sources by 2020. It's one of at least 17 solar and wind projects covering hundreds of thousands of acres, green-lighted with loan guarantees by the Obama Energy and Interior Departments in the Southwest. To President Obama, these massive installations, together with billions of dollars more to promote all sorts of green technologies, represent progress and a big down payment on the most soaring promise of his 2008 campaign.
This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal.
You put $90 billion into green jobs. And these businesses, many of them have gone out of business.
But in their first debate, Republican nominee Mitt Romney attacked the president's green agenda more than once.
You don't just pick the winners and losers, you pick the losers.
And a lot of the environmental debate today is over how much we know, how much we can know, and what we should do about it if we do know.
Charles Kessler is senior fellow at the Claremont Institute and the author of a new book examining Obama's place in the American progressive movement.
You have progressives who think that we're in a position to know much more about the future of nature, the future of the planet, than ordinary people think we can know.
People like Buzz Hilberry.
I'm no scientist, but CO is what makes plant grow, what make you breathe. They're trying to choke us all out by stopping the burning of coal.
Welcome to West Virginia coal country.
I saw people selling their homes, moving away from the state of West Virginia, moving away from my county.
Folks here say Obama's green agenda threatens their way of life. Do you guys feel that the industry is under attack?
Definitely. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
But the Obama administration sees a much bigger problem that needs solving right now.
Does it make any sense to pretend climate change isn't happening and hope we can deal with it later?
No, sir, it doesn't.
Such certitude about global warming explains why EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson has restricted greenhouse gas emissions through regulation, held up or reversed permits for mines, and imposed new, more stringent rules on coal-fired power plants, even in the middle of the Great Recession.
Is there any evidence that they're harming the economy?
None, sir. None that I'm aware of.
It's just not right.
West Virginia State Senator Art Kirkendall insists she's flat out wrong. You're a West Virginia Democrat. Do you feel abandoned by this White House?
Yeah, I do. I feel very let down.
But when we spoke in the summer, he wasn't so sure about Mitt Romney either. Well, he has a history of speaking out about global warming. He was the first governor to sign cap and trade. Do you think his support for coal is sincere?
That's a tough question.
I talked to a lot of coal miners, and all of them are Democrats. And they hate President Obama's policies. But you know what? They're also really wary of Governor Romney.
I don't think they have a lot of reason to be worried about Governor Romney. And I can tell you this, those of us who are going to vote for Governor Romney are going to do everything we can to hold his feet to the fire, to make sure that our economy is unleashed.
In other words, Mark Levin suggests, it's economic growth that will generate environmental solutions, not the other way around. Bjorn Lomborg agrees. That's how real progress happens.
The trick is not to believe this is about having government mandate specific progress and say this is where we should innovate, this is how we should do it, this is what we want out of it. Focus on broad-based innovation, not on specific mandates.
So now you have a choice between a strategy that reverses progress or one that builds on it.
Voters will decide which strategy is which. This debate is far from over. While the results of November's elections won't end it, they will nonetheless set America on a 4-year course that could profoundly affect people in this country and around the world. Only distant generations may know if and how the chosen course protected the planet. But we and our children will know soon if they helped or hurt our way of life.